The Asus TUF A15 is a budget-friendly gaming laptop that looks good based on the specs. However, there are at least two serious issues that you need to know about before you consider buying this gaming laptop. The A15 uses AMD's new Ryzen 4000 processors, and they're also paired with NVIDIA graphics. There are a few different specs available though. You can find examples of different configurations, as well as updated prices linked in the description. As there are quite a few different configurations available, the internals can differ quite a bit. This is my lowest spec configuration. Note the single heat pipe up the back and single M.2 slot. Now with the next spec up, there are two M.2 slots, and the cooling solution is also larger for the higher specs. The A15 is also available with different size batteries. The 48 Wh option has a 2.5 inch drive bay, but you don't get this with the larger 90 Wh battery option. That 90 Wh battery is seriously impressive. This laptop has that inside, and it lasted for almost 9 hours in my just streaming YouTube test, which is the best result I've ever gotten from a gaming laptop with discrete graphics. Now that does come at the expense of not having the 2.5 inch drive bay, but with two M.2 slots, I think you're probably going to be sorted for storage options anyway. But either way, it's good that the option is available, so you can pick which config you like. The speakers are also on the bottom of the machine, and they sound above average compared to most other gaming laptops. Alright, so by now you've probably heard that the A15 runs hot, and the main reason for that, simply put, is due to these vents on the bottom. But the vents aren't actually directly over the fans themselves. I think the idea is that air comes in through the other components, and it's designed to keep the rest of the chassis cool. It does do a good job at that. Even under heavy stress test, while just using the laptop normally, it doesn't feel hot at all, and that's probably further aided by the plastic build, which doesn't really conduct heat that well. The sacrifice of this though is that the GPU and CPU core temperatures inside this device do get quite hot, approaching the 100 degrees Celsius point. I think 95 or 96 was what I was seeing in most of my stress tests and gaming, which is a bit up there. And to be fair, that was with the higher 2060 config. With, say, the 1650 Ti, it was cooler, but you also get less performance there. Now, Hardware Unboxed have already done a good investigation into this chassis and what causes the heat temperatures, so I'll leave a link to that video up here if you want to check it out. But basically, they go into things like vents being covered up, those bottom vents that I just mentioned being restricted, and the different heat pipe designs, which I've already showed, and they also test with the bottom panel completely removed, showing how that affects the thermals. So I definitely recommend checking that out if you want any more information on that. I've only tested a small handful of Ryzen 4000 laptops so far, and so far they all run on the hotter side, more so than I'd like. Honestly, when you look at the A15 compared to the G5, review on that coming soon, it actually doesn't look that bad. The G5 gets over 100 degrees and it's just not very good. Now, I'm not trying to justify this at all, but yeah, I just find it interesting that this seems to be a pattern of higher temperatures. I mean, I know these are meant to be budget-friendly gaming laptops, but yeah, that kind of sucks to see. Hopefully there are other models that don't have this issue. I'm still trying to get in more Ryzen 4000 laptops so that I can test that out. The A15 is available in two different finishes. This one here is Fortress Grey, and it has this metal finish on the lid. This one I've got here is Bonfire Black, and it's all plastic, kind of like the interior. So the interior of both of these machines is the same exact design, it's all plastic. The only difference is that Bonfire Black one has the same design on the lid, while the Fortress Grey is metal. Now, I did actually find the Fortress Grey one to be a bit more sturdier in terms of like screen flex, as you'd expect. It's metal compared to plastic, but the interior, it was actually pretty flexible, more flexible than I'd like. I mean, it is plastic and a budget gaming laptop, but at the same time, in practice, I didn't have any problems with this and never noticed it while typing normally or using the laptop day to day. Now, the sizes of these two A15 models I've got here are about the same. There's a slight height difference, but I couldn't actually notice this when putting them side by side. As we saw earlier, the internals can actually vary quite a bit. There are different battery options, you could have a 2.5 inch drive installed, and there are different heat sinks and heat pipes based on what level of hardware you've got. So the weights can actually differ quite a bit. Now I'll leave some examples up around here of the three models I've tested, but yeah, expect this to differ based on what's inside. There are also three different sizes of power bricks based on the specs that you've got, and these weigh different amounts too. I found the touchpad and keyboard to work quite well. The keyboard's got a single zone of RGB lighting, and there are limited effects available through the software. The only thing I didn't like was those smaller arrow keys on the keyboard. The camera and mic are pretty average, but at least it's got one unlike others from ASUS, like the G14. Now, if there are two main issues with the A15, one being thermals, which I've already covered, the second would be the screen. According to the spec sheet, the A15 is available with 3 different screen panel options. Now, the screen in all 3 of my models was the exact same 15.6-inch 1080p 144Hz panel. They've all got FreeSync thanks to the AMD Vega graphics, and while on paper, FreeSync and 144Hz sounds like a great gaming combination. And look, when actually playing, I didn't have any issues with this laptop. To me, it looked fine, but I know that I am not personally sensitive to slower response times, which is why I recently got the tools so that I can test this out. Now, over the 3 A15 models I tested, I had anywhere from 19 to 22.5 milliseconds greater response time on average, which is honestly pretty slow, especially for a gaming laptop with a 144Hz screen. That's just not ideal, and for a lot of people that play fast-paced games like esports titles, you'll probably notice that. Now, I didn't notice it personally, and I played over 20 games on these machines, and to my casual eyes, it looked fine, but yeah, based on the numbers, it's not looking good compared to other options out there. And that's not all the bad news when it comes to these panels. They've also got lower color gamuts at around 63% sRGB. So, okay for gaming, like it's going to be fine, but if you're doing anything outside of gaming, like say video editing or Photoshop, that kind of stuff, I'd definitely be looking elsewhere. These panels just also aren't very bright either, and I got anywhere from 245 nits to 285 nits at 100% brightness. Ideally, you kind of want around that 300 nit range. I think that's pretty good, but yeah, these were a bit dimmer than I would have liked to have seen. So these are gaming laptops. How well do they perform in games? It of course depends entirely on the specs, and the 1660 Ti and 2060 models I tested were actually quite good. In many games, honestly, the difference wasn't that much, and it was an extra $200 or $300 or so to go from the 1660 Ti to 2060, and in many cases, I don't think that's worth it based on the results that I saw. 1650 Ti was okay low-medium settings in most modern games, but the 1660 Ti, I think that is still a good sweet spot. The port selection is actually pretty decent. Most of it is over here on the left-hand side, so if you're right-handed, you don't have to worry too much about it getting in the way of your mouse hand. We've got the Gigabit Ethernet port, which faces up the preferred way, so you can pull the cable out quite easily without the need to lift up the machine. HDMI 2.0 port, which is connected to the Vega graphics. 2 USB Type-A ports, which are 3.2 Gen 1. The Type-C port is 3.2 Gen 2, so it is faster, but it is connected directly to the NVIDIA graphics, so you could use it with an external screen to get that speed boost, or you could also use it with other applications such as VR. For the I/O on the other side, we've just got a USB 2.0 port, and on the TUF that doesn't have the big heatsink inside, there is no air exhaust vent on this side. However, the higher spec configurations do have an air vent here. Now let's discuss the price of the A15. This will change over time, so you can find the price for different configurations updated linked in the description. Honestly, I think the price seems pretty reasonable for the hardware that you're getting. The Ryzen 4000 processor with 8 cores is able to stand up against Intel's i9 offerings, which in most cases are 2 to 3 times the price. So if you need pure CPU processing power, this could be a good option if you're on a budget. I mean, you can get something like the Acer Helios 300 for similar money, which performs similarly, runs cooler, and has a better screen. So if you're just gaming, something like that makes more sense to me. So at the end of the day, the ASUS TUF A15 is a little difficult to recommend unless you really need that processing power. There are better options out there with better screens that run cooler and perform similarly in games for similar amounts of money. Combined with high temperatures, which may affect device longevity, and that slow screen, it's just a hard sell in my opinion. Anyway, let me know what you thought of the ASUS TUF A15 gaming laptop down in the comments. And if you're new to the channel, then get subscribed for future laptop reviews like this one.